In Europe's northeast, along a narrow strip of land bordering Russia, three small states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, have suddenly moved to the center of regional geopolitics. For years, tensions have simmered. But now, Moscow is issuing one of its starkest warnings yet, saying the Baltic States could burst like an overinflated balloon if pressure continues to escalate. It is a metaphor that sounds simple, yet beneath it lies a deep message about internal strain, strategic miscalculations, and the risk of pushing a complex region toward a point of no return. So what exactly have the Baltic governments done to provoke such a reaction from Moscow? Is Russia signaling a shift in its posture? And how close is the region to a real crisis? Today, we break down the situation through verified information, geopolitical context, and expert analysis. To understand why Moscow responded so sharply, we must revisit a series of recent moves by Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, actions that Russian officials describe as increasingly confrontational. Over the past several weeks, the three governments have implemented policies that cross what Russia considers long-standing red lines. These include the construction of the Baltic Defense Line, a Cold War-style network of bunkers, concrete barriers, anti-vehicle obstacles, and fortified positions stretching hundreds of kilometers along the Russian border. The closure of multiple border checkpoints, disrupting cross-border travel and humanitarian movements. Increasingly assertive statements from Lithuanian officials regarding the Kaliningrad region, one of Russia's most sensitive territories. For Moscow, these are not merely defensive measures. They are seen as signals that the Baltic states are adopting a more forward-leaning, even provocative, security posture. Lithuania's renewed focus on Kaliningrad, particularly discussions around the Suwalki corridor, the narrow land bridge connecting Kaliningrad to Belarus, has added a volatile layer to the situation. Several NATO exercises have simulated the disruption or blockade of this corridor. Russian analysts argue that any interference with transportation routes to Kaliningrad would be viewed as a direct challenge to its territorial integrity. These concerns intensified after Lithuania cooperated with Germany on deployments involving Leopard tanks and enhanced rotational forces on its territory. Taken together, these developments mark one of the most sensitive flashpoints between Russia and NATO in the region. The next trigger involved a decision by Estonia and Latvia to issue departure notices to thousands of long-term residents of Russian origin, many of them elderly individuals who have lived in these countries for more than half a century. This development highlighted a complex and often overlooked issue: the legal status of non-citizens, a classification applied primarily in Latvia and Estonia. For decades, many Russian-speaking residents born in the region have held a special type of identification document that limits their civil rights, including restrictions on public sector employment, participation in elections, access to certain social benefits, opportunities in the police, military, and emergency services. The recent tightening of residency regulations has revived debates about minority rights in the Baltics. International observers have noted rising concerns over social fragmentation and a growing sense of marginalization among Russian-speaking communities. For Moscow, the expulsions are framed as a humanitarian issue and a violation of the rights of compatriots living abroad. Cultural policies have also contributed to escalating rhetoric. Several recent decisions by Baltic authorities, such as limiting the use of the Russian language in schools and the removal of monuments from the Soviet era, have drawn criticism from Moscow. Supporters of these policies argue they are necessary steps toward strengthening national identity in post-Soviet societies. Critics, however, warn these measures risk deepening ethnic divisions. Russia views them through the lens of its official doctrine, which states that Moscow may intervene diplomatically and in extreme cases with stronger measures. If Russian-speaking communities abroad face systemic discrimination, this sets the stage for a dangerous cycle of mutual suspicion. Beyond political disputes, Russia's warning about a balloon under pressure is largely rooted in economic fragility. For decades, the Baltic economies benefited significantly from their role as logistical hubs for Russian goods. Ports such as Riga, Tallinn, and Klaipėda thrived on the transit of oil products, metals, fertilizers, timber, coal, ton. In some years, transit-related revenue contributed 20 to 30% of national GDP. But following 2022, the Baltic states imposed stringent restrictions on Russian cargo, including bans on port access, rail transit, and nearly all commercial interactions with Russian companies. Russia responded by shifting its exports almost entirely to alternative routes, including large new capacities at the Ust-Luga port complex near St. Petersburg. The result was swift. Cargo volumes in Riga dropped sharply. Rail transit revenues declined across Estonia and Latvia. Port operators faced layoffs and partial shutdowns. Inflation surged at times to among the highest levels in the EU, driven by soaring energy costs and restructuring pressures. For Moscow, these structural weaknesses confirm the metaphor. According to their narrative, the Baltic economies are under internal pressure that could lead to instability without external intervention. Baltic officials often describe the Baltic Sea as a NATO lake, especially after Finland and Sweden joined the alliance. But analysts caution that this characterization may oversimplify a complex strategic environment. From Russia's perspective, its Iskander-M missile systems deployed in the Kaliningrad region cover the entire Baltic area. Its electronic warfare capabilities have periodically disrupted GPS and communication signals across northern Europe. The narrow Suwalki corridor remains a critical vulnerability for the Baltic states, potentially isolating them from Allied reinforcements in a crisis. Military experts note that the Baltics lack strategic depth. The region's geography is flat, narrow, and heavily dependent on rapid NATO support. This asymmetry between Baltic political rhetoric and their delicate security position contributes significantly to Moscow's warnings. One of the least discussed, but most consequential, aspects of Baltic-Russian relations is the electrical grid. Despite political disagreements, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania remain physically connected to the Brel Ring, the Soviet-era regional power network linking them to Russia and Belarus. The Baltic states plan to disconnect and synchronize with the European grid in the coming years. However, Russian officials warn that an abrupt or hostile disconnection could result in electricity shortages or disruptions, especially during winter months. Energy experts agree that a disorderly transition could impact industrial operations, heating systems, electricity prices, overall grid stability. This technical dependency is seen by some analysts as Russia's last significant non-military leverage in the region. Behind the geopolitical tensions lie domestic challenges. Rising costs of living, labor protests, including farmers and transport workers, demographic decline across the region, political fragmentation within coalition governments. The Baltic states remain firmly aligned with NATO and the EU, but internal social pressures are growing. Analysts warn that sustained economic and demographic stress could heighten political polarization, making governments more sensitive to external pressures and less flexible diplomatically. Moscow's warning, what it really means when Russian officials say the Baltic region risks bursting like an overinflated balloon. They cite three core factors: economic strain resulting from the loss of Russian transit revenue, security exposure due to geographic vulnerability, social fragmentation related to minority rights disputes, and demographic shifts. These elements, they argue, could create internal instability long before any military confrontation occurs. Baltic governments reject these claims, saying they reflect deliberate pressure narratives. However, even neutral observers agree the region is experiencing significant structural challenges. As tensions continue to rise, one question remains central. Are Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania building long-term resilience, or are they being pushed toward a geopolitical breaking point? Much will depend on how the region balances its security commitments within NATO, its economic transition, its treatment of minority communities, and its ability to navigate a rapidly shifting European landscape. For now, the Baltic states remain confident, Russia remains firm, and Europe watches carefully, aware that any miscalculation in this sensitive region could have consequences far beyond its borders. What do you think? Are the Baltic states safer under NATO's umbrella, or are they moving into a period of heightened risk? Share your views in the comments. And stay with us as we continue to follow this story with clear, verified, and global context.